Hi everyone, it's me, Tim. Today I want to talk about some career advice from Adam Savage. Yes, MythBusters Adam Savage. I'm a huge MythBusters fan, and because I have a YouTube subscription, I've ended up watching quite a number of YouTube channels, and one of them is Adam Savage's Tested. By the way, it's a really good channel. You should watch it. This particular video I'm making after I just watched Quit Taking It Personally, which I'll link below, which is one of several pieces of advice that Adam Savage gave on your career. Basically, he gave career advice to people who were sending in questions. And I wanted to talk about it because as I watched this video, I was like, oh yeah, that's exactly from my own career. Oh yeah, that's exactly what happened there. So I just want to talk about this. And also, I loved his first one, which he calls QTip. So I want to talk about the three big pieces of advice he gave during that video. And I want to talk about how it very, very much matches my own advice I would like to give about the game industry, having a career there. So the first one is called QTip, which stands for Quit Taking It Personally. And he talks about basically not taking work events really personally, especially bad things that happen. You can learn from that, and I've talked about lessons from failure. My example, though, that I want to talk about is I've talked in a few videos, and I'll link them below, about somebody who worked for me, but he did something my boss told him to do that I didn't want done, that they both knew I didn't want done, and he was told not to tell me, and how all that stuff went down. And I kind of want to tell you what I hope he took out of that, and I wanted you guys to get from it, which is, look, that was a bad situation, and it was a bad situation created by my boss. The moment he went to someone on my team, told them to do something I didn't want him to do, and they did it, and then he said, don't tell me, even though I was literally going to find out the very first day that I played the game, which was the next day. And this guy who did it knew I played the game every morning. So what I pulled from this is, look, I can't control my boss. I can't. This is something my boss had done to me before and to other game directors before. So I couldn't even take it personally because it wasn't him going, I'm going to screw over Tim. It was like just something he did. If he wanted something in the game, he didn't care if the directors didn't want it. He found ways of getting it in. And I'd watched him do this for years on other people's projects, and then he did it on mine. Now, I can't control him. I literally can't. He's above me. But then I realized I can't control my employee either. They can do whatever they want. The only thing I can do is tell my employees what I expect from them, look at what they do, and then say, this is not what I asked you to do. Now, they can have the reasons or excuses or explanations, whatever you want to say, about why they did it. But they can't for one moment say, you can't excuse me of doing this. No, you did something I didn't want done, and you knew it. It's not personal. I'm not like angry at this guy personally. It's professionally, as his boss, you did something wrong. Admit it. Tell me you're not going to do it again, and let's move on from this. Because if that had kept happening, what am I supposed to do when my boss goes to one of my employees and keeps having them do things I don't want them to do? I can't stop the boss, but I can try to stop the employee. And since when a game comes out, the game director is held responsible for all of it, I have to do something. So the only thing I could think of doing was I'm going to monitor everything you do. I'm going to talk to you if you ever do something again that I don't want you to do. And then we'll go to HR about it because I've warned you. Now, a lot of you are like, this isn't fair and all this. You're right. It isn't fair. My boss is creating an unfair situation. But don't take it personally. This is a business problem. This is a problem in communication and hierarchy, however you want to frame it, whatever your favorite lens is. Yes, I can report him to HR. If my boss is going to do what I think he's going to do, her have that thrown away. Her have it won't affect the guy's career. But maybe he won't, which will make somebody think twice about doing something for someone above them if that person doesn't have their back later. Think about your career long term. Do you want to be known as the person who does things like this? think about it. Don't take it personally. Learn from it. Which got me into the next thing that Adam Savage said, which was late career luxuries. These are things that are stories he tells about things he did, but he only could do it because later on in his career, he had the luxury of being able to do that because he was financially stable, he had a reputation, maybe he had his own company. He mentions dropping clients as an example of that he had really bad clients and he basically said, I can't work with you anymore. You cannot do this when you start. This is only something you can do later when you're like, no, you're coming to me and I don't want to work with you. Now for me, I've talked on many videos about walking away from projects, about stepping down from lead or director roles into lower paying, lesser responsibility roles, even quitting companies altogether, just turning in my resignation and walking away. Now, I've told all those stories. I'll link them below. You can learn from these. But these are not things I expect you to do your first or second year. I see people doing that all the time. I see people making lots of mistakes, like demanding to have a lead role or be a director or whatever, and they've been in the industry like 2, 3, 5 years. And I'm like, really? You really think you've learned everything you need to know? But this is different. This is a luxury. This is being able to do that because I can afford not to get paid for 6 months. If you can't do that, you can't just walk away from a project or a job or even a role. These are late stage career luxuries. So basically, prove yourself first before you take drastic steps like that. But then the last one he talked about, which doesn't have a cool acronym, but I loved it, is basically mistakes happen in your job. They have to happen. And he talked about those happening on film sets where they're paying a whole bunch of people and they're about to film something. You've just got to keep going. And his recommendation there was to stay flexible, have options available, pick an option and just keep going. And also what's very important is you don't have to blame the person who made the mistake that caused this happen right then and there. You can pick a moment later to talk to them privately and basically say, hey, what happened? How are we going to avoid that in the future? And if it's a pattern, you can deal with that. But in the moment, you just have to fix everything. I've talked about that here. I've talked about how I have fallbacks in my design doc. So if a feature goes in, but it's not working correctly, or it's really buggy, or they can't figure out how to get it in the way you're saying, you have a fallback in your design. Oh, we can't get throwing working just right. Oh, we can't get this type of weapon done. Oh, this part of combat is janky. You have some kind of fallback. This is something I know we can do because we've done it in the past, and we can just fall back and do that. And because we've done it, I have a really good estimate for how long it will take, which means you know how long that option will take. So if you're 2 weeks out and you have a fallback that'll take 2 weeks and the one that you're working on isn't working, you know that's when you have to pull the ripcord and jump to your fallback. I would highly recommend when you make your design documents that you have a page of fallbacks. They don't have to be completely detailed because there are things you've done before. But you can say, hey, if this feature doesn't make it in, here's a fallback. If this feature doesn't get completed, here's a fallback. I had an entire Confluence page called Design Fallbacks on the Outer Worlds. Now, I take a lot of notes, and this is where I get to the other thing. You can forgive people for mistakes. In fact, frequently when people make mistakes, it's because it's either they're trying something ambitious, which is good, they're trying to challenge themselves, which is good, or it was just, oops, anybody could have done that. It was like the fallout mistake of the less than equal instead of less than that caused a crash bug that took us 2 weeks to find. That is a completely forgivable mistake. But don't forget it. In other words, I still remember that. The reason you don't want to forget it is you don't want to make that mistake again. You don't want that person to make that mistake again. You want to learn from it. It's part of the reason I take all my notes. It's forgive but don't forget. And that doesn't mean you hold this sort of Damocles over this person. Sometimes I'm saying don't forget for your own personal growth. But as a lead, you should be being asked to write reviews of people. This is when you can look at your notes and go, I've noticed a pattern. You can go to someone and say, hey, you've had a lot of bugs this year, a lot more than the other programmers. Or you've been a lot slower than the other programmers getting your stuff done, even though the tasks were estimated to be about the same length. What's your response for that? And if they have a good response, like, hey, I talked to you about it. We looked at these tasks and it turns out they were badly estimated. Or, one of my parents passed away. Remember, I lost a month of work. Okay. But if it's just, I don't agree, whatever, then you have a problem because you have a pattern that they're not learning from and won't even acknowledge. So I liked Adam Savage's recommendation, which is understand that mistakes happen, stay flexible, go with options, and then look at it later and see, is this a pattern? Is this something that needs to be corrected? Can it be corrected? How are you going to deal with it? Worry about that later. Do not do that in the heat of the moment. Anyway, I loved that video, and I loved QTip, quit taking it personally. I understood things you can do in your career, but later, not early, and that mistakes happen, have options, deal with it later. Great advice, great channel, highly recommended.